This presentation is about branding. As a small business owner, as an entrepreneur who creates something, the onus to distinguish your business in the marketplace is on you. Remember in the past when we talked about distinctive capabilities and standing out from competition, we talked about how those were necessary for success in the marketplace. To be able to distinguish your resources and capabilities in that way was what was needed to have a sustained competitive advantage over your rivals. A key way to do this is through branding. So branding is kind of the marketing component of where you articulate and constantly back up your uniqueness and your view of what you are, what sets you apart in your messaging and your presentation to the public, to your customers, to those who come into contact with your business. All right, so that's why branding is important. It is selling your competitive advantage to potential customers. All right, specifically, what is branding? Branding is the process of creating a clear, distinctive, and durable perception in the minds of consumers. Branding is standing out from the clutter. So think about it, and this continues to increase. We're trying to be sold to almost every waking hour, and that's especially true if you're spending a lot of time online. We're constantly being barricaded with messages wanting us to part with our hard-earned dollars. There's a lot of noise out there. Branding is about standing out. Before we get into the specifics, let me give you a little history lesson. To sustain success, companies have always needed to erect barriers to competition, and we're going to talk about how branding erects such a barrier. But let's do the history lesson. At the beginning of the Industrial Revolution, the barrier to competition was ownership of the means of production. If a company had machines and its competitors didn't, the companies with the machines was the one that won. But by the time most companies now had the machines, the barrier had to shift to something else. So the barrier shifted to a factory assembly line. The companies that developed a quick and efficient and very specialized assembly line won. If a company could afford to own and manage a large factory with trained employees and conveyor belt efficiencies, that company won. But that didn't last either. And so in the 60s through the 80s, financial capital became a much bigger deal. Large became extremely important because it was the companies that had the financial resources to be able to aggressively expand internationally and therefore be able to greatly improve like economies of scale, which means basically when you produce more, you can produce them cheaper. Those were the companies that won. But then in the 80s, as manufacturing began to give way to the information economy, the barrier changed from monetary and physical capital to intellectual capital. If a company had patents and copyrights to keep competitors from reproducing its products and processes, the company with those patents won. Today, even the intellectual barrier is starting to show cracks, and maybe branding, especially for small businesses, seems to be the next thing. Yesterday's patents lose their value as companies constantly leapfrog one another in a race to innovate. Not only that, using intellectual property as a barrier can sometimes hurt needs than help them out. Sorry, hurt companies. I had a little misprint there on the slide. An example of that is that Apple tightly held on to their operating system, whereas Microsoft didn't. Microsoft let other companies have access to that intellectual capital, and Microsoft swept the field in the 90s because more computers could use the widely available Microsoft software and then build apps and other software that fit well with Microsoft rather than Apple. And so Microsoft won the day. So it wasn't just that intellectual capital was enough to secure an advantage. The newest barrier to competition are the mental walls that customers erect to keep out clutter. I talked about how you're being sold to all the time. How do you filter through all of that? Branding is going to help you not be filtered out. The ability to be successful then is the ability to get your product, your company, your brand into people's brains. The human mind deals with clutter by blocking most of it out. You don't want messages about your business to be blocked out. If there are already products and brands in a person's mental box, it's hard to find room there for a new brand. You're not going to be noticed if you look like your competition. You need to be distinctive. This is the way to get into people's mental boxes. In baseball, there's this idea that you need to hit them where they ain't. It's kind of the same with branding. There is a book that is influencing a lot of what I'm saying today, and that book is called Zag. And the idea is that when others zig, you need to zag, right? You need to go the opposite direction that others are going in order to distinguish yourself, in order to hit them where they ain't. So here is what branding can do for you. Here is what hitting them where they ain't can do for you. You improve your memorability. It's easier to remember the branded company. So that's what we've been talking about. Being in, having a mental box, finding occupation in the mental box for that customer's category for a given product or service is about memorability. Second, loyalty. Customers are more likely to repeat buying and less likely to go for competing brands when your company is well branded. Third, expansion. Your ability to expand a well-known brand to cover a new category, product, service, or locations improves, right? So if you're not well branded, it's harder to do that. But if you have a distinctive brand, it enables you to grow, all right? Premium price. Branding can allow you to price above the competition. You're not seen as a commodity. You're seen as differentiated. You're something unique, different about you that customers may be willing to pay more for. Lower marketing expense. The more memorable you are, the brand is going to give you more payback per marketing dollar spent. And so you can market more and get a bigger payback, or if you're on a very limited budget, that allows you to market less because the marketing that you do does such a good job. All right. And then finally, lower risk and greater confidence. This is from the customer's perspective. So put quite simply, people tend to buy from a well-known company. So these are all aspects of branding. I've often kind of asked myself, why do people put certain logos on the back of their car? Like, why put a Yeti logo on your car? Like, what inspires you about a well-insulated food or beverage container that makes you want to kind of stamp that on your identity? There's something there. That sticker says something that the individual wants to say about themselves. It may be about, I pay for high quality goods, or I like the outdoors, or a combination of those things. But there's some branding involved, right, that makes people want to do that. The company has succeeded in a lot of respects. Your brand is more than a reflection. It's who you are, who your company is. That is, who you are actually backs up the message that you're trying to convey, ideally. Branding creates a gut feeling. You want people to have this gut feeling, this positive gut feeling, positive emotional reaction to who you are and who your company is. It doesn't even have to be articulatable, right? It just needs to be something that they feel. All right. So let's think about local restaurants here in Murfreesboro. Does anyone have a gut feeling about any of the restaurants listed here? The Boulevard, the Slick Pig, Clearview, Marina's, Jefferson's, Donut Country, Jack Brown's, Just Love, Jeff's Family Restaurant. Well, let's think about the elements of a brand, which I've listed here. there are four major elements: presence, value, image, and positioning. All right, so presence, how prominent you are in the marketplace, your ease of access, how kind of well known you are. You want to be a known commodity, but being a known commodity isn't enough. There are known commodities that are struggling businesses that are sinking because their knownness is a negative thing. So you also want to be known for your value, right? That's part of your brand. So you want your brand to be perceived as having a high quality at its price point. All right. Third thing is image. Is there something about your brand that conveys a certain aura of prestige? I've hinted at it a little bit before, maybe said it directly in another presentation, but for small business owners, it's really difficult to compete on price. You're much more likely to compete on differentiation, on quality, on there being something unique, whether it's your quality, something unique that you can do for customers, your customer service, that draws customers to you. So what about image? And then positioning. So all of those things are great, but are you different than your competitors? Is there any reason for them to choose you over your crosstown rival, or somebody else? It could be in a different part of the country, but because you sell a product online, it doesn't really matter where the location is. Are there some differences with competitors? And that doesn't necessarily just mean with the physical product or the actual service, but in some way of handling customers, whether it's the way you treat them, your personality, whether it is something about the experience that's unique. What are those differences that are there? These are the four elements of a brand. So now think about a restaurant that you're familiar with. It can be one on this list. If Murfreesboro is not your hometown, it can be one in your hometown. How are they doing on this criteria? Or if you do know these restaurants, which ones are doing the best with presence? Which ones are doing the best with perceived value? Which ones are doing the best with image? Which ones are the best positioned relative to competitors? They all kind of, I think, stand out on this list in their own unique way. Food, it's kind of easier to do that with. But think about how these companies are branding themselves. If you haven't heard of one of these companies, then their presence may be lacking. So, these are the elements of a brand. It's easier to think about it with companies that we're familiar with. How good of a job are they doing being unique and differentiating themselves by being well known, being perceived as valuable, being perceived as prestigious, and differentiating themselves from customers. Okay, before we go any further, there's one other term and idea that I want you to be familiar with, and those are touch points. And touch points are the tangible parts of a brand, parts that you can see, feel, hear, maybe taste, that customers come into contact with and can recognize you from those things. So there are things like the company name, your logo, if you've got a slogan and tagline, letterhead, signage, if there's maybe uniforms that your company wears, your advertising, your actual ads would be touch points, your design of marketing materials, your website, your facilities and maintenance, and is your building attractive and in a good location, or is it well maintained? Social media presence is a huge touch point in today's current business environment. All of these touch points should be coherent, they should be easily understood, and they should complement one another to produce an overall message image, right? And so they're all trying to get across kind of the same idea about your company. Now, they don't all tell the exact same story, but they shouldn't clash with one another. So you shouldn't have half of your touch points, screaming, hey, we're the prestige company, and the other half screaming, we're the value, low cost, low price company. You need to have a consistent message, and it can be more fine-grained than just that. It can be about the kind of customer that you're going after and consistently getting that message apart in terms of the customer's interests or whatever characteristic of that customer. It can be about how you're unique from the others in your field and what sets you apart in that way. An example of this from fast food is Wendy's. They try to set themselves apart from McDonald's, Burger King, Hardee's because their restaurants have a little more upscale feel. They call their sandwiches deluxe. When they advertise, they try to get across that Wendy's is of higher quality. Just lots of different things that they do to try to, distinguish themselves a little bit. Target does the same thing vis-a-vis Walmart. And so, but the idea is that all of these different aspects of your brand are in different ways telling customers kind of the same thing. They're variations on a theme. Like in a symphony, there's this theme, and then the composer has all these different variations, ways of doing it that are slightly different, but it's coherent because they're all it's the same theme over and over again. This is the same idea with touch points for a brand. Anytime a customer encounters a touch point and actually takes it in, right? They think about it. They are reevaluating your brand according to the new information. And so you don't want to constantly be sending mixed signals. You want to build on past messages and reinforce who you are, but even maybe go a step beyond that. Really good advertising takes prior messaging with touch points into account and says, you already know this stuff. We're going to build on this knowledge and go a step further to show you something about our value or our prestige or whatever element of brand that you want to emphasize. This slide tells the rules for branding. All right, so I'm going to go through. Rules for branding. Number 1, start with yourself, your passion, your interests, your skills. Your brand is going to be based around those passions, interests, and skills. They make up the core of your brand, and your messaging is going to reflect that. Second, you need to craft a vision statement, or you may have one already, but that vision statement should give your purpose, your reason for existing. This vision statement and what you're aspiring to is going to be constantly reinforced with your branding. All right? Who are your competitors? You need to know who your competitors are. You need to do your research, and then you want to contrast yourself with those competitors. So you need to do your due diligence. If you're competing in a city like Murfreesboro, who are the other Greek restaurants that you're competing with? Or who are the other car repair shops that you're competing with? Or who are the other event planners that you're competing with? If you've got a physical product, you've got a little bit of a harder chore because, if you're shipping things to households, now your competition is kind of everyone. Number 4 is big. You need to have the only statement, and I will go through this further in the next slide, but right now you need to think of a statement that distinguishes your company from others. So this is the form. This is an example for Harley-Davidson. So for Harley-Davidson is the only motorcycle manufacturer that makes big, loud motorcycles for macho guys, mostly in the United States, who want to join a gang of cowboy outlaw types in an era of political correctness norms. Now, I exaggerated those characteristics a little bit, but that kind of gives you a feel for the type of branding that Harley-Davidson wants for themselves. All right, I'll come back to that. I'll come back to point 4 on the next slide. Number 5, name matters. You want your name to be different. You want it to be brief. You want it to be appropriate and not generic. You want it to be easy to spell, satisfying to pronounce. So think of some companies you think are well named. I thought of a few. I think JetBlue is a good name for an airline company. I think Smucker's is a good name for a jelly and jam company. With a name like Smucker's, it has to be good. I think Starbucks is a pretty good name. It kind of fits that. It's different. It's brief. It's not generic. It's easy to spell. It's kind of satisfying to pronounce. I don't know. You can think maybe are there local companies that fit that criteria that you think are named well. A good name carries a lot of brand cachet. It can really help your brand stand out from the clutter. Number 6, back to touch points. The touch points need to be aligned with your "the only" statement. Those touch points that do the best job of conveying your message are the touch points that you need to emphasize. And so if there's something about your company that stands for quality, you need to emphasize maybe the physical location of your company, or some kind of advertising that lets people see the quality. If you are known for being kind of a smart company, witty, something about you is intelligent, you would probably need your social media presence to back that up. You want to use touch points that work well with that message that you're trying to convey. Number 7, earn customer loyalty. More than 50% of customers will pay a 20 to 25% premium for their favorite brands. This means there are huge profits for retaining customers. So how do you do that? You've got to be creative. Imagine a wine bar that specializes in wine education. To create loyalty, they may create a database that keeps records of the wines that customers have tasted, along with the customers' ratings for each wine. Customers could then access their history to see what they've tasted before, and then you or some kind of program that categorizes the wines can give new recommendations based on that. And they could do other things. You could do other things with that, like the more you taste, you earn different types of rewards, things that keep customers from going to other places but coming back to yours. You incentivize them, something that you do to personalize it and give them incentives to come back for more allows you to keep existing customers, the ones that are going to spend more. Another way you can earn customer loyalty is with promises. So you make promises during your sales process, and then customers expect you in the future to keep those promises. So it can be promises about customer service, about follow-up, about servicing, whatever the business is. You'll have to have a unique set of promises. And then you need a process in place to determine if your customers or clients believe that you are delivering on those promises. Number 8, you want to create a community, maybe online. It's got to be some way, but for you to have more repeated interactions on a semi-regular basis, it's probably going to be better to be online. So you've got to create connections either between yourself and the customer, or even better, at least for you because it takes less energy, is connections between your customers. A shared interest in something about your product or something that your product relates to is a great way to do this. Anything that is not a necessity, that's a luxury, tends to be something that people are interested in and are passionate about. So I don't know, you're probably involved, or you know people that are involved in some kind of online community centered around a team or an artist or a product or a hobby or an activity. This can be done, with almost anything, maybe to a lesser degree, but if there is demand that is discretionary, there is a chance to build community around it. And finally, consistency. So all of this stuff is great. You've got to be consistent. You've got to be, you've got to deliver that quality all the time, and your messaging has to be consistent. So for a brand to create that singular gut feeling, that's what we're after with branding, it needs to feed a similar high quality experience each time. It takes time to be clear in customers' minds. So you don't want to send mixed messages. You don't want to change directions with what you want your company to be and feel like. You have to be consistent with it. It dilutes the power of your brand when you're not consistent. Okay, let's go another step and unpack number 4. We want to craft a statement that is basically our brand in statement form. And I know we want to create a gut feeling, but if we could unpack that gut feeling and put it in words, this is a good formula for being able to do that. So we're going to start off with the what and the how. Our brand is what, the only blank, that how. So our brand is the only frozen pizza that tastes like Naples, Italy. Our furniture dealership is our brand is the only furniture dealership that sells sustainably manufactured furniture. Our brand is the only computer repair service in town that makes house calls. So remember, you're looking for differentiation and radical differentiation if you can get it. You want to differentiate your brand from the other options that are out there for customers. Now then, the who. The who are your customers. That's your market segment that you're going after. All right. The where. What is the geographic location that the people that you're going after live in? All right. The why. What is the underlying consumer demand that you perceive that you want to tap into? In other words, what's in the market that is kind of your reason for existing? All right. And finally, the when. You want, as an entrepreneur, to zag, right? Because you want to be different than what else is out there. There's really not many places where a new small business owner can jump right in and say, hey, I'm going to dominate this market and set the tenure for this market I am going to, define what this market is. No, in all probability, the market has already been defined by other brands, and you have to jump in and say, yeah, but we're different. The when is something about the market or something about our era and in time, that is in possible conflict with the why of your brand. All right. So customers have some demand, and it's in conflict with what's going on. All right. So if you look down below and talk about Harley Davidson, the why is for people that want to join a gang of loud and fast outlaw types. The when is in an era of political correctness. So do you see how the when clashes with the why? There is something about this era that your brand is reacting against, or there is something about other restaurants in Murfreesboro that your brand is a reaction against. We're different somehow with the customer experience, or with the type of food, or with the value price point, whatever it might be. There's something about us that's different. We're not going with the flow. We're zagging. Okay, so I'm going to ask you guys to do this for an assignment. And when you see it, just know that I am going to be looking for the why and when to clash, in addition to the other elements. I want to know what type of company you are, how you are distinguishing yourself, who you're making your product for, where, the geographic location, the why, what's the rationale for your company, what are you tapping into, what's the why, and then the when. What is it clashing with? Why are you zagging? I need to see something that reflects a zag with your statement. So since this is a video, I can't require you to do this right now, but I would encourage you to, since we just talked about it, since it's just fresh on your mind, go ahead and take a stab on this. Save it, because you might be able to use it for the actual assignment, which will probably be in the form of both a message board and maybe one of the homeworks. And if you want to, you can run it by me, and I'll give you some feedback on it.